It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. In a dramatic move, the Spanish Senate voted to strip the region of Catalonia of its autonomy on Friday. The vote came just hours after Catalonia's regional parliament voted to declare independence from Spain. When the Catalonian parliament decision was announced, supporters of independence cheered in the streets of Barcelona and Catalonia. The two conflicting votes, one in Madrid National Senate and the other in Barcelona's regional parliament, represent an intensification of clashes that has been brewing for a while now. On October 1st, the region of Catalonia held a referendum on whether it should become independent. 90% voted in favor of independence, but the turnout was only 43%. The low turnout was at least partly because Spain's central government actively tried to prevent the vote from happening. It is uncertain exactly what will happen next, but Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy invoked the never-before-used Article 155 of Spain's constitution, which states that the central government can take over a regional government if it undermines the interest of Spain. Rajoy has now dissolved the Catalan regional parliament, threatened to arrest anyone resisting the order, and says new elections will take place. Here's what Rajoy had to say following the Senate's vote to invoke Article 155.
I want to tell Spaniards and all Catalans to be calm, that things will be fine, they will be measured, they will be done with effectiveness, as we have done until now. That Spain is a serious country, it is a great nation, and we will not tolerate a few people who try to liquidate our constitution.
Now joining us is Sebastiaan Faber. He's professor of Hispanic Studies at Oberlin College, author of the forthcoming book, Memory Battles of Spanish Civil War, and co-author of the Nation article, Have Spain and Catalonia Reached a Point of No Return? Sebastiaan, good to have you back.
Great to be back.
So, Sebastiaan, we've seen images of people celebrating. Presumably, opponents are not so happy. What's the mood in Catalonia today, and what has this decision from Madrid evoked?
I think the mood is mixed. It's true that people who have long dreamed of a Catalan independence break out the cava, the Catalan champagne, and are toasting to their independence. It's not clear how long this independence will last, or rather, it's clear that independence won't last long at all, because Rajoy, today, the Spanish Prime Minister, as you showed, has invoked Article 155, basically revoking Catalan self-government, a self-government that has been in place since 1978, and has also dissolved the Catalan Parliament and has called new regional elections on December 21st. So the mood is mixed. Even, I think, I would say among those celebrating now, the awareness that bad things are about to happen will still be in the background. It's unclear to what extent Spain's imposition of its legal framework on the now newly declared independent Catalonia, how that will affect public services, public servants, security forces, basically the nuts and bolts of public, the framework of public services in Catalonia, and not even mentioning the economy, which will also take a hit. So I think what we're looking at in the weeks ahead are acts of civil disobedience, maybe acts of resistance from public servants, boycotting of these elections called from Madrid by some of the Independence Party, and maybe most seriously, criminal persecution of political leaders in Catalonia. The Attorney General in Madrid has already said that he will not hesitate to accuse the people responsible for the Declaration of Independence this morning of rebellion, which is a crime in Spain that carries a 30-year prison sentence.
Now, Sebastiaan, Catalan's president, Carlos Puigdemont, said he wanted to negotiate with Rajoy. But Rajoy did not give the offer much chance, it seems. To what extent has this crisis been intensified instead of diffused by Madrid?
It has been intensified by Madrid for the past 9 years, at least, if not longer. The prehistory of the current moment started, you can say, in 2006 when Catalonia successfully passes a newly defined statute of autonomy, kind of a regional constitution that is approved by the Catalan parliament by referendum in Catalonia and by the parliament in Madrid as well. And it's then the Partido Popular, Rajoy's party, which is currently governing, which then initiated an appeals process with Spain's constitutional court that finally, after 4 years, succeeded in declaring a large part of that newly defined statute unconstitutional. And that really set off a reaction in Catalonia that ballooned the support for the independence cause, but especially also for the cause of self-determination tremendously. So by latest polls, about 80% of people in Catalonia believe that Catalonia should be asked whether it wants to belong to Spain or whether it wants to be independent. A kind of referendum like we saw in Scotland and like we've seen in Quebec in Canada. That is also really the only political solution for this problem. What we saw happen today, both the Declaration of Independence, that's kind of doomed to be to die soon after it came to life, and the revocation of Catalan self-government by Madrid, neither of those will solve the political problem. The political problem is that a large part of Catalonia, maybe more than 2 million Catalans, do not feel they want to live in Spain as it's currently configured. So the real crisis here is a crisis of the Spanish political system as it was built in the late 1970s and as it has evolved over the past 40 years. That is what is at the heart of this problem. For some people in Catalonia, the independence movement has been a channel to voice their discontent with Spain's current political system, which they see as lacking in democracy, as being deeply corrupt, as being built on an unhealthy collusion between economic elites, political elites, and media elites. That's what they want to break away from. This tragic thing, in my view, is that the standoff over the status of Catalonia in Spain, the standoff over the independence movement, and the standoff over this morning's Declaration of Independence has managed to divide the political forces in Spain that have been fighting to reform Spanish democracy and to make it healthier and better.
Now, do you think that the 43% turnout on the referendum is a wedge that Rajoy expects to benefit from?
I think the 43% turnout has been used by Madrid as a way to explain that the referendum did not translate into a real political mandate. The stronger and more frequently invoked argument by Madrid is that the referendum was illegal to begin with because the Spanish constitution doesn't allow for referenda on self-determination within regions. So the 43% turnout, I don't think, is a very significant figure within the framework of the arguments presented by Madrid at all. However, I think what it did show is the nature of the political problem, which is that maybe up to half of people in Catalonia do not feel that the state housed in Madrid has legitimacy. And that is a real political problem, and that is not going to go away by the measures implemented today. It will not go away through the elections that were called for December 21st, whose legitimacy in itself is now being questioned because of the circumstances under which they are called. So that is a long-term issue that only dialogue can solve, and in my view, only a referendum like we saw in Scotland can really solve in Spain in the long term. I mean, Spanish constitution has to be reformed, and it means that Spain has to come to terms in a different way with the fact that it's a multinational state, where there's large parts of the population who identify as both Spanish and Catalan, or both Spanish and Basque, or as only Basque and only Catalan and not Spanish at all, really.
Right. Now, it seems that Prime Minister Rajoy believes that new parliamentary elections in Catalonia will resolve all of these issues. Is there any reason to believe that this is the case?
No, I don't think so. I can think of a couple of different scenarios. One is, I mean, if the elections were normal regional elections, legitimate regional elections, then they even wouldn't solve the problem, because likely the division of seats in the Catalan parliament between pro-independence and Independence Party and parties against independence would remain more or less the same, or maybe thanks to the escalation of the past couple of months, the independent representation would grow, and they might actually have now a majority of the popular vote, which they didn't have in 2015 in the last regional elections. But the problem is that elections as currently called, with political leaders of the pro-independence party likely to be persecuted by the judiciary in Madrid, with the CUP, the far-left assembly-based party, likely boycotting the elections, I don't think will solve the political problem in any way at all.
Sebastiaan, Louis Rebel, who is Podemos' regional representative in Catalan, has argued that at this time it would be best to give up on the unilateral declaration of independence. Why is the Podemos representative saying that?
The Podemos's official position, as defined by Podemos Madrid, has been that they are against the unilateral declaration of independence, and they're in favor of negotiations that will lead to an official binding referendum on self-determination in Catalonia. They see that as the only viable political solution for this problem, and I think they're right in that. The problem is a little bit that the current climate makes that an unattractive option for most other parties involved in this dispute. It's also important to point out that the question of Catalan independence has caused divisions within Podemos, both between Podemos Catalunya, Podem, and Podemos Madrid, but also within Podemos Catalunya and within Podemos Madrid, where there's some who reject nationalism from the get-go as a bourgeois ideology that can only lead to bad things, whereas others see nationalism and independence as legitimate vehicles for emancipation, for the establishment of an independent republic that can implement more socially just policies. So and even today in the vote in the Catalan parliament, this division was clear. So at least 2 members of the Podemos faction appear to vote in favor of independence, whereas the official line of Podemos was to vote not in favor of independence.
All right, Sebastiaan, finally, what, in your opinion, are the roots or causes of this conflict? I know you said and cited the Constitution and then regional differences and differences between Catalans and the Spaniards and so forth. But what is the real beef here?
I think there's 2. One is the one that I said, that Spain, as a nation state, has to find a way of organizing itself, which could be, for example, federal, that better fits its multinational makeup. And that multinational makeup is centuries old, but it has evolved over the past 40 years thanks to the current system of autonomous regions. So now there's new generations of Spaniards who proudly feel Catalan or proudly feel Basque, and who demand more or different kind of self-government. And Spain, if it wants to survive as a democratic nation, has the obligation to come to terms and to find ways to make that happen. And that can only happen through democratic dialogue. The other big cause behind the current situation, I think, is the deep crisis of legitimacy of Spanish democracy as a whole. And we saw an awareness of that crisis come out strongly in May 2011 with the Indignados movement. The foundation of Podemos in 2014 was another clear indication of the crisis, and the strong showing of Podemos in the first national elections in which they participated also showed that the two-party system that has dominated Spanish politics since the late 1970s, or at least since the 1980s, has outlived its usefulness and has lost legitimacy in a major way. In some perverse way, the behavior of the Partido Popular Rajoy so far in the Catalan crisis can be explained as a desperate attempt to maintain this outdated political system. And sadly, I think the polarization has shored up the base of the conservative base of the current Spanish government, and has even in a scary way revealed the continued presence in Spain 40 years after Franco's death of extreme right-wing Spanish nationalism that isn't afraid to dig up symbols and gestures and flags and hand salutes that go straight back to Francoism.
Right. And one more question. If the Catalan leaders are arrested, will this further escalate the situation, obviously, and will it become violent?
I hope not. There's two ways in which it can become violent. One is civil resistance versus state violence of the type that we saw on October 1. Another way is civil versus civil violence. And we've seen a little bit of that already today, where, for example, groups in favor of Spanish unity attack institutions seen as defending Catalan independence, and vice versa. That might happen too. So there's an important way in which the political gamesmanship and the political game of chicken has trickled down into civil society and caused deep divisions that I hope not, but could well manifest themselves in violent confrontations in the street. I know, there's been plenty of verbal violence. I hope that physical violence can be maintained at a minimum. But I think the lack of responsibility, especially from Madrid, in the way they've handled this crisis, and the ways in which the hardcore right wing of the governing party in Spain has taken advantage of this opportunity to fan the flames of anti-Catalan sentiments and to call for severe punishments for Catalan leadership, I think has not helped the situation in any bit.
Sebastiaan, what will it take to diffuse the situation now?
That's very hard to say. I think both parties have moved past the moment where they could sit down and dialogue with each other without losing face. I think the mood in Madrid is a desire for punishment of the Catalan leaders who dared to challenge the constitutional order in Spain. And I think that desire for revenge or for punishment from Madrid will poison the political climate in both Spain, but especially in Catalonia. So as Catalonia is preparing for its December 21st elections, which were just called by the Madrid government, invoking its new power to do that, I think it's unlikely that those elections on December 21st will yield in the short term a situation in which a solution can be found through dialogue. So eventually, I think new national elections in Spain, so a renewal of the government in Madrid, that might lead to a situation in which both parties can sit down and negotiate.
All right. Sebastiaan, Faber, I thank you so much for joining us today and look forward to further analysis from you.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network.